Welcome back to another video, and this is my collective eyeshadow palette review for March. Welcome back, and today we'll be doing my sort of collective eyeshadow palette review video that I try to do for every month, but sometimes because this depends a lot on how many palettes I have bought, so sometimes there's been a bit of like maybe skip, but mostly I do this every monthly. And in this video I'll be reviewing the eyeshadow palettes that I've been trying out during the last month or so. Today we'll be having 4 palettes. Usually we have something between 4 and 6 depending on how many palettes I've been trying, but I do like to try out my palettes for a bit longer time to get sort of a full understanding how the color stories and shades work, and are there any dot shades and that sort of stuff. So that is why there's usually takes a bit of time to collect the palettes in one. Something new we're going to be doing today is that I will be also, aside from seeing 3 demo looks and swatches on the side of your screen with each palette, I will be also trying to see that if I can come up with palette comparisons that you might already have in your collection, so then you can make a better evaluation if that palette is something you want to buy. Sometimes we do this in favorites order, and I think today what I'll be doing is that I'm going to be showing the palette that I was perhaps most disappointed in first, and then I'm sort of going to go through the other 3 that I think that each 3 had some good things to them and some things that I wasn't so excited. But I do think in terms of the fact that overall we didn't have like 3 palettes that I think that were nice but still had some drawbacks to them. I do think those are going to be staying in my collection, but I don't think there was like anything super wowing I'm not feeling that any of these palettes were like my ultimate new favorite eyeshadow palettes that I have tried, so I think that's kind of describing what we're working with today. But let's now get to the eyeshadow palettes themselves. Okay, so the first palette, and unfortunately I think this is a palette that I think I'm going to be trying this out for my makeup rotation that it's currently in, but I can already say that considering especially how much I have given this brand praise from their previous palette, this was a bit of a letdown. So first palette we're discussing today is this one. So this is the Plastic palette by Blend Bunny, and we had one shadow. I did have to repress this one because this did broke in the transit, but I was able to repress it, and the shadow itself performs well. I really wanted to like this palette because Blend Bunny has been known for quite some time that they do a lot of these big palettes, and while especially their matte quality has been something pretty I think for example my favorite matte formula from any brand period is Blend Bunny's matte formula. They do very colorful and deep shades in a formula that is still very easy to work with, even for someone like me who has a very light skin tone. But also if you have a deeper skin tone, the formula is very excellent because it really packs a punch, but it's a pleasure to work with. And what the brand has been recently doing well, especially with their Longing palette, which was the previous palette that I have bought from the brand before this one. They had palettes in between launching, but that's the previous palette that I had before this. They also have been amping up their shimmer quality. So I had quite a lot of expectation, and I was so happy that they finally came out with a palette in a smaller size. Unfortunately though, I do have to say, I don't know what happened with this one, but I'm not digging the mattes. I don't know what have they done, because I didn't check, I'm a bad reviewer, I didn't check how, for example, the pan size compares to the other Blend Bunny palettes that I have, because sometimes if they change the pan size, there can be kind of some kind of changes with how the pressing is done, which can affect the performance of the shadow. But this doesn't feel like the same matte quality that I have seen from the brand before. I'm gonna now pop in the sort of demo looks and swatches. I do think the swatches were pretty decent. The swatches, for example, for me didn't give any a reason for concern when I initially did the swatch of this one. And you can see that the looks are this is a palette that, even though it kind of looks that it has a couple of fun shades, there's the minty blue shimmer, and then you have the orange here, but essentially you will still get pretty red pinkish looks with this one, which I do think is fine. It's one of the reasons that I did get this one, because I did like this sort of color story, which was a play from neutrals with a bit of pinks and that sort of thing. And I do actually think that the curation was also pretty alright. Something that I am a bit maybe missing, and what comes to the matte quality, for example, is that you can see there are the 2 light brown mattes over here. And Blend Bunny's previous palettes that I have from the brand that have these kind of lighter mattes, Previously, these have been still packing a lot of punch when you initially get them to the eye, but they've been still easy to work with. But with these ones, I felt that I really had to build them quite a bit to show up. Similarly, actually with this orange shade over here, and this is very strange because I do have the Sickly Sweet palette, which is their sort of pastel palette from I think it's over like a few years ago, and that also kind of, I think it does have what kind of pastel leaning orange shade in it, and I just feel that these sort of like, because Blend Bunny has been excelling with this sort of like even like colorful or just neutral matte shades that other brands have been like kind of saying that they're difficult to formulate, but Blend Bunny has been able to formulate them in a way that they do actually show up immediately, and you don't have to do this, that you have to build and build for the shades to show up. So I'm just like a bit like I feel like, because I wanted to like this palette a lot, because I did want to like encourage the brand that they could now move on to making a bit more smaller and curated palettes, but I don't feel that the matte quality in this one, unfortunately, is the same that it's in the matte quality that I have to like the other bigger palettes from them previously. I do have to say, like, the deeper shades that you're seeing over here, I did feel that with those ones, the quality was pretty on par with their other deep shades. They were like pigmented, but they were easy to work with, and even with the lighter mattes, like after I was able to get them to build up, they did work very well, so there isn't like any kind of blending issues. I also do think that the shimmer formula in this one is very beautiful. The only like dot shimmer for me is this sort of reddish, I think this is like a duochrome. This shade over here, it did crease on me quite a lot during the daytime. However, this isn't the first time that I have the issue that especially this sort of, for some reason, this sort of red jeweled toned shimmer seems to be a formula. I think it might be a pigment that the brands usually use for this kind of shimmer, that it tends to crease on me no matter who the brand is that has manufactured the formula. So that's just a small like nitpicky thing, but otherwise I do think the shimmers in this one do work well. So unfortunately with this one, I think as I said, that I will be trying this at the end of the rotation that I currently have the palette in my sort of makeup box, but this might be the first Blend Bunny palette that I might actually be decluttering, and I will be decluttering it for the reason that I just don't think the matte quality, because I have the Dollhouse palette, I have the Sickly Sweet palette, and I do have the Longing palette, and comparing the mattes to this one, it just seems that this is it's like a different kind of formula. But as I said, I don't know that have they done something different with the pressing or formulations in general, but for me, unfortunately, this was a disappointment. With the Blend Bunny palette, I don't actually have any comparisons with this one, because when I tried to took a quick look to my makeup drawers, or when I started thinking about that, have I actually seen this specific kind of color story before, I wasn't able to immediately come thinking that, oh, that's exactly the similar palette to the plastic palette. But I do think that if you have a lot of like neutral palettes or neutral palettes that have pinks and reds in them, then you're most likely gonna get pretty similar looks with this one. It can be then that you don't have the sort of carrot orange or the sort of like minty blue shimmers, but I think pretty much like any other neutral or sort of neutral red leaning palette will give you pretty similar looks. But so the first palette of the day, not such a winner from me, but I think the rest of them are a bit better luckily than this one. So let's now then move from indie momentarily for the drugstore, though we do have actually one more indie palette in this video. So I actually, since e.l.f. is a brand now that is sold in our country, I actually did get one of the eyeshadow palette. So this is the Keep It Ethereal eyeshadow palette. So this is their like, they do have more of these, but so far in our country this seems to be the only one available, and this is relatively new from the brand. I am going to open this up, and I'm actually going to show this one closer up because it is quite like a bit smaller. So this is essentially a very basic neutral palette, and I was pretty curious because from e.l.f. I have tried one of their minis before. I did get it once in a sort of mystery, or it was in a subscription box, but that was a long time before the brand became available like in our country. So I think it was just maybe the brand maybe testing out what kind of feedback they got from our market, but I wasn't super impressed when I tried out the sort of mini. So that is when I got this one. I was thinking that okay, let's see how this is going to work out. In terms of the fact that does this offer what a good neutral palette should offer, I do think yes, you have a pretty good gradient from light to deep shades, and I do think in terms of mattes you have pretty much like the basics covered. I'm gonna now pop in the swatches and the looks, and you can probably already like tell from the looks like it's a basic neutral palette. I think there's not like so much you can do. What I do appreciate with this one is that you can do a more warm leaning look and then you can do a more cool toned leaning look. So I do think this is one of those neutral palettes that kind of gives you the option to like both of them. So if you're unsure that do you want a super warm toned neutral palette or a cool toned one, I do think this gives you a good like in between option. Now about the sort of powder quality, I do think the mattes especially were pretty impressive. Like I have to say, like this cost around 12 euros in our country if you buy it if you buy it in full price, and considering that here in Europe generally drugstore eyeshadows aren't always the best thing you can get from the drugstore, I do think this surpasses quite a lot of drugstore eyeshadows that I've tried, and I do think the matte, I could already tell when I swatched out the mattes that okay, this is gonna be good, but when I tried out the mattes I thought that okay, this is great. Something I do have to say from the mattes, you do have to build them a little bit, but with this one I can kind of forgive it because it is a more of a drugstore formula, but I do think in terms of matte quality, if you especially like a more easy to work with matte formula that it blends effortlessly and you're willing to maybe to put bit effort for building up the shades, I do think you're gonna like this one. With the shimmer shades I was kind of curious because I did try the individual e.l.f. eyeshadows. I did include those in one of my makeup review videos. I wasn't super sorry. I wasn't super happy with the individual like shimmer eyeshadows. I think those were just, you needed a lot of building with those and you still didn't get anything like super, how should I say, super wowing. I do think this one has actually two shimmer formulas. So I think the lighter shimmers over here, these are pretty on par with the sort of individual eyeshadows that they have launched before this particular palette. I did feel that I could actually get these to build a bit easier, so it could be that they did bit maybe tweaking when launching this palette. Surprisingly, the deeper mattes, these actually did pack a lot of punch. Like I really needed only I use my fingers for my shimmer shadows mostly, so I didn't really have to go digging in too deep with my finger. The deeper shimmers especially were pretty impactful, and I would maybe hope that maybe in the future we could get the lighter shadows in this formula, because I would much rather have this formula also in the lighter shadows rather than the sort of formula that they're now doing with the sort of like these individual shimmers, because I just think that the shimmer formula in the deeper shimmers just like built so much better, and it was much more impactful. Obviously, I think when thinking about that, so what kind of options like do you have for this one? So this is obviously duping the Makeup by Mario, and I think that is also, I'm gonna pop in the image and the name in the screen, but I think that's also called Ethereal something is in the Makeup by Mario's shadows, like eyeshadow palette. So if Makeup by Mario is a hard brand for you to get and you're looking for something similar, then this could actually be a good option. Or if you have the Makeup by Mario palette, I don't think you're gonna get anything like new buying this one. I do think the Makeup by Mario palette, it might have a couple of more shades than this one, so it could be that you are missing some individual shades if you are comparing this to the Makeup by Mario one. And definitely, like, because the Makeup by Mario is I haven't tried the brand personally because it's one of those like brands that is hard for me to get, but I do think the formula is probably a bit like higher quality compared to the e.l.f. formula, but I do think that you are probably gonna be able to get quite many matching looks when you compare the two palettes. I was trying to look through my like neutral palette collection, and aside from the fact that obviously this is like duping another high-end palette, but I don't think like I was able to find too close of a dupes, because I was initially thinking that pulling out my Natasha Denona I need a nude palette, but I do think that this has actually much more warm tone shades compared to the I Need a Nude one. The I Need a Nude palette, for me at least, is pretty like cool toned or very like in the middle neutral leaning compared to the fact that this actually has a bit more warmer tones in it. So I think aside from the Makeup by Mario palette, I can't think of close dupes, but obviously if you have a very large neutral palette collection, then you might want to look it through before buying the e.l.f. one. But yeah, this was, while the formulations in this ones weren't perfect, as I said, the shimmer formula could use improvement. I do actually think from drugstore this is a pretty good neutral palette option if it's something that you're interested in. So the next indie palette we're discussing, and this was the first try to me. So I bought my very first bellabeautébar palette. This is the it's just Dead Roses palette, and this was their Valentine's palette actually from a year ago. They did release a new Valentine's palette this year. It was called Morally Grey, but for me it was a bit too grey leaning and it was a smaller palette, so that is why I didn't want to get it. So I think this is one of those very very in your nose Valentine's palettes if you think about the color story. I do think it was smart because I do believe they actually did re-release this during this Valentine's, because this was actually, I think, a limited edition release during last year's Valentine, but this year actually a lot of pink and purple Valentine's palettes seem to be on trend, so we actually did see quite a lot of palettes coming out with this similar color story, so I do think it was quite smart for the brand to re-release this one. So this is obviously a very colorful pink and purple palette, and I think you have to go to this thinking that if you like subtle looks, you definitely should stay away from this one. I think in terms of the formula, color, I'll talk about the formula a bit later, but in terms of just the color combination, something that I did initially, immediately feel that maybe could be tweaked out is that there is really only one blending out shade. It is this pale pink shade in the lower corner over here. All the other shades are either mid-tone shades or they are very deep shades. So how I went with my looks, because I didn't want to use the same pink, pale pink for all of my looks as a blending out shade, I did use a bit lighter hand with some of the mid-tone shades, and I was kind of able to make them work out as blending out shades, but you had to be pretty careful because this is definitely a formula that will build quite quickly. I'm gonna now pop in the looks and swatches. So as you can see from the swatches, especially if you look at the shimmers, these are very impactful shimmer shadows, and some people are gonna like the shimmer formula in this one and some people are not gonna like it. For me, I did definitely notice that some of the chunkier shimmers, they did crease on me. So some of these shimmers are a bit maybe on the sort of older indie shimmer formula where we saw a lot of these impactful shimmers, but that were very chunky and with some lid types, so it just didn't work out. And I definitely had the, as I said, the issue with the fact that some of the chunkier shimmers did crease on me. Also, this is a shimmer formula that I would not recommend if you have sensitive eyes, because the shimmers can be a bit chunky, and if you get any of them to your eyes while application, I do know that someone with a sensitive eyes, they will have tearing up, so that is just something to consider. And also, if you know that you are sensitive to red pigments, you have some allergies, always check the ingredient list of eyeshadow palettes. So these, especially pinks and red shades, are known that they can cause eye irritation with some people, so with sensitive eyes I would definitely check the ingredient list before buying this one, that if you want to buy it. I do think, because bellabeautébar has been one of those very hyped up brands in terms of the matte formula, I can kind of see it why. Okay, my dishwasher is apparently still on, but I think we're gonna be fine with that one now. Yeah. So let's get back to the matte formula. So about the matte formula, I do think that for a pigmented shadows that are reds and purples that are usually a bit hard to formulate, I do think that these blended out pretty well together. I actually did have a bit maybe an issue with some of the mattes, that because you can see that some of these do have bit similar tones when you actually start looking in them. So I had maybe some of them that maybe that they were so blendable that the shades started kind of blending in together into a one sort of single shades instead of looking like that you had this 2 or 3 distinct eyeshadow mattes on your crease. So it is a very, even though it's a very how should I say, punchy formula, it is very easy to work with. However, there's the downside of it is that with some of these shades, I think it was a bit obvious that they're almost too blendable. What else? Is this worth, because a lot of influencers have been hyping this brand up. This isn't a cheap brand. The palette is magnetized, which thus brings the price up. I could live without that because I don't rearrange my palette, so I could live without having magnetized palette because that would decrease the price. So I bought this from Monolith Shop, which is a European retailer, and this was close to I think 80 euros. Do I think that this is worth like 80 euros? Because I have something pretty similar to this one, minus the more impactful shimmers. I think with bellabeautébar I would want to try out another palette from them, but I do think that while the shimmers were impactful, did some of them crease on me, yes, and while the mattes were very punchy, however, maybe the color combination as a whole at times maybe wasn't as versatile as I thought. I think a bit 50-50 how I'm liking this, and am I actually like, do I think that I should get, maybe I would like to get maybe another palette, maybe something that would be, because I have been noticing that bellabeautébar comes a lot with these very like grungy, colorful, like they do these more purely colorful color stories, and then they do these grungy, colorful color stories. So maybe something more like neutral with a twist would be something I could try out from the brand. Now let's get to the actual comparison. So when I said that I do actually have something a bit similar, so in terms of the matte shades, I could get most of them with the berries palette that I have, like this huge berries palette that I have from by Beauty Bay. So like I'm gonna see that if there's any way I can put this side by side. This might not actually succeed, but we shall. I can actually like. So you can kind of see that they are pretty like how should I say it? If you discount the bellabeautébar's like shimmers, these are pretty similar in terms of color story. I do think that if you like, obviously because the Beauty Bay formula is a drugstore formula, with some of the Beauty Bay shades you do actually have to build the shades a bit more, but I think with you can get a lot of similar end results with the Beauty Bay palette compared to the bellabeautébar palette. So I think in terms of indie, because this is a more expensive indie brand, I would maybe be interested to pick out another palette from them. But do I think that this was maybe anything super unique in the makeup market? No, and I actually did notice when I was buying that I might actually have something similar. But this has been the kind of only color story from bellabeautébar where I've gone out like thinking that yeah, I would definitely want to try this out. And I do think like if you like your super impactful like indie shimmers and you like this kind of matte shades, you're not gonna be disappointed, because at the end of the day you are gonna get pretty impactful look with this one, but this really has to be a color story that you like if you're planning to buy this particular palette. So we are doing the last palette for today, and it's actually the palette that's on my eyes, so you're gonna be seeing this look in the pictures soon. So I did what everybody else did. I bought the Natasha Denona Bloom palette. I know this. I know a lot of people were like thinking when she launched this was okay, but we have seen that from her before. But it was a very me color story, so obviously I did end up getting this one. So this is a very sort of punchy, orangey, rose leaning palette, but this is a more warm toned rose, because I do think that there are like two types of rosy tone palettes. You can get a more mauvish cool toned leaning, and then you can get this sort of very warm toned leaning, and this goes to a warm toned leaning category. In terms of formula, I do think this is very on par. The previous palette that I had for this one was the I Need a Warm palette. I'm not going to be including the comparison between the I Need a Warm and this one, because I have actually, you can go to my Instagram, I did sort of make a comparison post. The I Need a Warm is definitely more neutral to this one. You can't compare, like when you put them side by side, it is definitely, this actually makes the I Need a Warm palette look like more neutral maybe than the palette this actually is, because this is so much more punchier and warmer and orangey leaning. I do think in terms of the color story and overall how I feel about this one is that does this suffer from a lot of the issue that some other ND palettes suffer from, that this has a lot of repetitive shades. I do think this has quite a few. So obviously I think the like obvious ones are especially these sort of like the blending out shades with this one have, so this one and this one over here look very similar on the eyes, and this one and this one over here are very similar on the eyes. Something else that I think you should consider, that this kind of looks, for example, that this shade over here is a more pink leaning shade, but this actually, at least with my particular skin undertone, showed up very orange. This could be an undertone specific thing. I have a cool rosy undertone, which means that some shades can show up on me a bit different than with others, and that's always how it goes with different type of skin tones and undertones. You're gonna be now seeing the swatches and looks. I do think that there is like a couple of, like this again isn't going to be one of those super versatile palettes you're gonna get a lot of looks with, but you can get a more sort of what I'd say a deep, I wouldn't call it a deep pink, but a deep, yeah, you can get a kind of a, because I did one, with one of the looks I tried to go more berry. So you can kind of do a more like berry, like deep berry leaning look with this one, but all the rest of the looks are gonna be something like you're seeing today on my face, which is gonna be a bit like a very fiery orangey leaning look. I do think the shimmer formulas in this one, I was hoping, and I was kind of hoping that this would now be a sort of upgraded rosy palette with the new Natasha Denona formula. I actually did end up decluttering my retro palette because unfortunately that palette was getting very much used up, and I was hoping that now that maybe she's coming up with a rosy palette, maybe in the future it would have the newest like shimmer formula. I do feel that the I Need a Warm and even the I Need a Nude palette, those have the kind of like a better, like more shinier shimmer formula, because with this one I feel that the only two very impactful shimmers that this had is the middle shade over here and then the duochrome shade in this corner. I feel that the other shimmer shades that this has are more reminiscent of the like older Natasha Denona shimmer formula that she has put in like the palettes that came out before the Yuka palette, because the Yuka was the first big palette that had the like the upgraded shimmer formula. So that is kind of a letdown, because I do think that if she would have bought more of the sort of amped up shimmers that she has done in some of her previous now big palettes now, I do think it could have elevated this palette quite a bit. Do I still like this a lot? I have to say that I do still like this a lot, but that is probably, and now we're gonna get to the comparison parts. So I think the most direct comparison that I was able to find with this one, and I'm gonna be popping pictures, I will be doing that with other palettes now that I'm actually mentioning them, because the e.l.f. palette I also don't have the like comparison palette that I made, but this I think is like Sigma's Corda Rosa maybe in a 2.0 if you could think about it. This is, I think, bigger, this is more shades than the Corda Rosa had, but I do think that this is a, like, if you have the Corda Rosa, because I do think Sigma still sells that palette. So if you have the Corda Rosa or you're planning to buy the Corda Rosa, I wouldn't get this one. I was thinking that why are these look something that I have done a lot of these before, and then I was thinking that, oh yeah, right, because I have had a palette before. The Corda Rosa was one of my like ultimate favorite palettes for quite some time. I had to declutter it unfortunately because some of the shades caused some tearing in my eyes. With this one, I'm happy to say that I haven't had any like tearing issues, like my eyes react fine to this, like this one, which means that there's no like adverse reaction. So unfortunately, even though I adored the color story with the Corda Rosa, I had to let it go. So I am maybe kind of happy that okay, now I have a similar palette to that one, but I don't get the eye issues that I got with this one. But if the Corda Rosa palette works for you very well and you have it, then I wouldn't recommend getting this one. Then something that I did actually have in my collection where I was thinking that okay, I actually could think about another one. So this is the NARS, what was this called? Afterglow Irresistible palette, and I'm gonna be again seeing that if we can somehow get this sensibly. So these are somehow like visible. So I do think that the NARS is a cap doesn't bend all the way, so that's why this is getting difficult. So I do think that with the NARS you can kind of get similar looks. I do think the NARS palette goes maybe a bit deeper and it's maybe a bit more like red leaning rather than orangey leaning. But I do think that you can kind of get some similar looks in between two of these palettes. So if you have the NARS palette particularly, I would maybe consider that okay, because what kind of added value for me, this kind of brings added value that because this has a bit more lightness and this has actually more mattes. Something that I wasn't just a big fan because the NARS palette is a bit lacking on the matte sides. So if you are someone who was looking for more mattes, this might actually still like be worth it adding to your collection. But if you don't mind it and you actually like the bit more like deeper looks, then the NARS one is actually I think much better alternative, and you might not need the Natasha Denona palette at all. And I think last thing that I should say about this one, I'm gonna just hold it right here so you can kind of like see. Some people, I think, commented that it's another neutral palette. This is definitely not neutral. I think you can see it from my Alex today. I did use the deep brown shades on my sort of like outer corner to deepen up today's look, but this generally doesn't have actually that lot of like neutral shades. So if you're looking for a neutral palette, then get the I Need a Worm or get the Golden palette or get Natasha Denona has a very big variety of neutral, like true neutral palettes on her website. This isn't it. This you definitely have to like your very punchy, orangey, rosy leaning looks if you're planning to get this one. But yeah, I am pretty happy with this one, even though you could argue that I have had something like this before already. I kind of have something close to this with the NARS palette I have. The packaging of this one I think is the best one Natasha Denona has done so far, so extra points for that one. But overall, I'm happy to have this in my collection because I was missing this kind of color story, and now I have it again in a formula that is actually doesn't irritate my eyes, so it's a plus. And even though it's maybe a bit repetitive even with it itself, I still have to say I do like this one a lot. So those were the sort of palettes for this month. Comment down below in the comments what did you think about the palettes. Have you tried any of these? Did you think differently from what I thought about the palettes? I would always be curious to know that what other people think from the stuff that I have tried. And also, if you have tried maybe some other palettes that you've been very excited about this month, then let us know also about those ones. If you like this video, push the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell button if you want to get notifications from my future content. You can also find me with the same nickname, Makeup Hedgehog, on Instagram. I hope I can see you in on the video. Bye bye!